In a mansion marked by secrets and tension, the new nanny tries to bring joy back to the millionaire's 5 daughters. But everything changes when the cruel stepmother locks her in the bathroom along with the girls, trying to silence the bond that has formed between them. Trapped and in despair, the nanny and the children fight to stay calm as the storm outside seems to reflect the chaos inside the house. Until suddenly, the millionaire returns earlier than expected, and his arrival turns the night into a devastating revelation. The rain fell heavily over London that June afternoon, turning the streets into grey mirrors that reflected the laden sky. Abigail held the strap of her worn-out backpack tightly as the taxi passed through the mansion's imposing gates. Her fingers trembled slightly, not just from the chill that seeped through her thin coat, but from the anxiety that had been tightening its grip on her chest ever since she received the call confirming her employment. She was young, only 23, and this would be her first experience as a nanny in such a grand residence. She came from a simple family in the Yorkshire countryside where she had grown up, looking after her younger siblings while her parents worked on the farm. When she decided to try her luck in the capital, she never imagined she would end up before a 3-story mansion with gardens that seemed to have no end and a marble fountain that spouted crystal-clear water even under the storm. The driver stopped in front of the main staircase. Abigail paid the fare with the last few notes in her wallet and got out, feeling the rain immediately soak her brown hair. She ran up the steps, her old trainers making a slapping sound against the flagstone. Before she could even ring the doorbell, the door swung open. A tall, elegant woman appeared in the entrance. She wore a tight black dress that highlighted her perfect silhouette, towering heels, and jewelry that sparkled even in the dim light of the rainy afternoon. Her blonde hair was impeccably styled, pulled back into a sophisticated bun. Her blue eyes scanned Abigail from head to toe, and the corner of her mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You must be the new nanny," the woman said, her voice laced with disdain. "Veronica Blackwood, I am the lady of this house." Abigail extended a wet hand in greeting, but the woman just glanced at it as if it was something unpleasant. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Abigail Thompson. It's a pleasure to meet you. Get inside. You're dripping on my imported marble floor." The young woman stepped inside quickly, treading on the Persian rug in the entryway. The interior of the mansion was even more impressive than the exterior. A gigantic crystal chandelier hung from the high ceiling, casting prismatic reflections on the walls covered in French wallpaper. Antique furniture and works of art adorned every corner. Abigail had never seen so much luxury gathered in one place. Veronica closed the door with a sharp movement. "I hope you don't get too used to the environment. You are just an employee, understand? Your place is in the children's room and the kitchen. I don't want to see you wandering through the other rooms." "Yes, ma'am, I understand perfectly." "Good. The last nanny didn't understand her place and had to be dismissed. The one before her, too. In fact, you're the 11th in 6 months. I think that makes it clear what kind of discipline we expect here." Abigail felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. The 11th nanny in 6 months. What had happened to the others? But she had no time to process that information, as firm footsteps echoed down the marble hallway. A man emerged from a side room. Richard Blackwood was imposing without even trying. Tall, broad-shouldered, with black hair slightly grey at the temples, he wore a navy blue suit that surely cost more than Abigail would earn in an entire year. But it was his gaze that surprised her. Unlike Veronica's coldness, Richard's brown eyes conveyed weariness and something that seemed like genuine kindness. "You must be Miss Thompson," he said, extending his hand with a discreet smile. "Richard Blackwood. Welcome to our home." His hand was firm and warm, completely different from the greeting Veronica had denied her. "A pleasure, Mr. Blackwood. I'm excited to start." "Excellent. I need to talk to you about my daughters. Veronica, please, ask the maid to prepare a hot tea for Miss Thompson. She's soaked." Veronica's expression hardened for an instant, but she forced a fake smile. "Of course, darling. I'll see to it right away." And she walked away down the corridors, her heels clicking on the floor. Richard led Abigail to an office panelled in fine wood, with shelves full of books and a huge desk covered in plants and architectural plans. He indicated a leather armchair for her to sit in while he settled himself behind the desk. Miss Thompson, I need to be honest with you from the start. My 5 daughters are going through a very delicate time. Their mother passed away just over a year ago, and they still haven't fully recovered from the loss. Abigail's heart ached. 5 girls without their mother. I'm so sorry, Mr. Blackwood. I can't imagine how difficult it must be for them and for you as well. Richard ran a hand over his face, showing for the first time the signs of exhaustion he carried. That's why I hired Veronica 6 months ago. I thought the girls needed a female figure in the house, someone who could fill in some way the void that was left. But, he hesitated, things haven't been easy. My daughters are wonderful, but they are very withdrawn. They don't connect with anyone easily. I understand. And the other nannies? None of them. Managed to stay for more than a fortnight. Some said the girls were difficult, others simply disappeared without explanation. He sighed deeply. Clara is 10 and has practically taken on the role of mother to her younger sisters. Sophia is 8, Alice is 6, Laura is 4, and little Julia just turned 3. They are 5 children who need love and patience, not just basic care. May I meet them? Of course, but I need to warn you about something important. He leaned forward, his expression serious. I travel a lot for work. My development firm has projects all over the country, and sometimes I have to be away for a week or 2. During that time, Veronica is in charge of the house. She has her own rules about how things should be run. I hope you can adapt. There was something unsaid in those words, a weight that Abigail couldn't quite identify. I'll do my best, Mr. Blackwood. I love children, and I promise to take care of your daughters as if they were my own little sisters. Richard smiled for the first time, a real smile, and Abigail noticed how it transformed his face, making him look younger and less burdened. Excellent. I'll take you to their room. They climbed the main staircase, passing through corridors lined with expensive paintings and Persian rugs. The mansion was a labyrinth of luxury, but Abigail couldn't help but notice how cold and silent everything seemed. There was no children's laughter, no sound of play, just the sound of their footsteps and the rain beating against the windows. Richard stopped before a white door on the 2nd floor. This is the children's wing. The 5 of them share this room. Your room is just across the hall so you can hear them if they need anything during the night. He turned the handle and pushed the door open. The room was enormous, decorated in pastel shades with 5 beds arranged in a semicircle. Each had a light fabric canopy and was covered in stuffed animals and colorful pillows. Shelves crammed with expensive toys lined an entire wall. A dollhouse the size of Abigail stood in one corner, and a chest overflowing with costumes occupied another. It was any child's dream room. But the 5 girls sitting on the beds did not look happy. They looked towards the door as it opened, and Abigail's heart broke at the sight of their pale little faces and dull eyes. Clara, the eldest, was in the middle, with one of the younger sisters on her lap and the other 3 clinging to her. They all wore impeccably clean dresses, their hair perfectly combed, but there was something deeply wrong with the scene. The children looked frightened. Girls, this is Abigail. She's going to look after you while Daddy has to work. I want you to be polite and obedient, all right? Yes, Daddy, Clara replied in a thin voice that tried to sound too mature for her 10 years. The others remained silent, just watching Abigail with looks that mixed curiosity and distrust. Little Julia sucked her thumb, clutching Clara's dress. Abigail crouched down to be at their level, a genuine smile lighting up her face. Hi, girls. It's so lovely to meet you. I'm sure we're going to get along great and have lots of fun together. Clara didn't answer, just hugged her sisters tighter. The others remained mute, as if they were afraid to speak. Richard coughed, clearly uncomfortable with the tense atmosphere. Well, I'll leave you to get to know each other. Miss Thompson, if you need anything, just let me know. He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. Oh, one more thing. Veronica has established a strict routine for the girls. They have their meals here in the room, have specific times for play, and must be in bed by 8 o'clock. Please follow these rules. Understood, sir. When the door closed, Abigail was left alone with the 5 sisters. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of the rain outside and the soft breathing of the children. Abigail took a step towards the girls, moving slowly so as not to startle them. May I sit here with you? Clara nodded slightly, and Abigail settled on the soft, carpeted floor, crossing her legs. Up close, she could see each of them better. Clara had long brown hair and green eyes that were too serious for a 10-year-old. Sophia looked like her older sister, but her brown eyes had a spark of curiosity she tried to hide. Alice was covered in freckles, with red curls that fell over her shoulders. Laura had rosy cheeks and a shy gaze, while little Julia was a doll with black hair and large eyes like her father's. "You know," she began to speak softly, "I have younger siblings too. When I was little, I used to look after them while my parents worked. We used to invent all sorts of fun games." Sophia tilted her head to the side, curious. "What kind of games?" "Oh, a bit of everything. We'd build forts with bed sheets, make up crazy stories, put on plays, sing, dance. One time we turned the whole living room into a castle using cardboard boxes." Julia took her thumb out of her mouth for the first time. "A castle?" "That's right. A huge castle with towers and everything. Do you have any boxes here?" Clara pursed her lips. "Mrs. Blackwood doesn't like mess. She says we should play quietly and keep everything organized." Abigail noticed how the girl called her stepmother Mrs. Blackwood, maintaining a formal distance that shouldn't exist between a child and the woman who lived in the same house. "And what do you like to do when you're being quiet?" "Nothing," replied Alice in a sad voice. "We just stay here in the room. Sometimes Mrs. Blackwood lets us watch television, but only educational programs." "And what about all these beautiful toys?" Abigail pointed to the crammed shelves. "Don't you play with them?" "They're just for decoration," Sophia explained. "Mrs. Blackwood bought them all after she married Daddy, but she said they're too expensive for us to ruin." Abigail felt a wave of sadness and indignation rise in her chest. 5 children surrounded by toys they couldn't touch, living in a luxurious room that felt more like a gilded cage. "Well, you know what? I think toys were made exactly to be used by children. How about we choose something fun to play with together?" Sophia's eyes lit up for an instant, but Clara quickly shook her head. "We can't. Mrs. Blackwood will be angry." "I'll take responsibility. I promise I'll take care of everything, and we'll put it all back in its place afterwards. How about that?" The 5 girls looked at each other, communicating through that silent language that only very close sisters share. Finally, Clara sighed and nodded. "All right, but just for a little while." Over the next hour, Abigail watched the 5 sisters transform. Timidly at first, then with more confidence they began to take dolls and stuffed animals from the shelves. Sophia showed her a building block set she loved. Alice found a dusty storybook. Laura discovered a set of colorful felt-tip pens, and Julia hugged a giant teddy bear that was almost her size. Abigail told funny stories from her childhood in the countryside, did different voices for each character in Alice's storybook, and even taught them a simple song she used to sing with her siblings. Slowly, the laughter began to emerge, timid at first, then freer and more genuine. The room that had once felt like a silent mausoleum came to life with children's voices. They were all sitting in a circle on the floor, building a tower with colorful blocks when the door flew open. Veronica stormed in like a whirlwind, her heels sinking into the carpet. Her face was red with anger. "What is going on in here?" The 5 girls immediately shrank back, returning to the state of fear Abigail had seen when she arrived. Little Julia dropped the teddy bear as if it had burned her hands. Abigail stood up quickly, placing herself between Veronica and the children. "We were just playing, Mrs. Blackwood, getting to know each other." "Playing?" Veronica's blue eyes flashed. "Look at this mess, toys scattered all over the room. I told you clearly that the girls must keep everything organized. With all due respect, ma'am, children need to play, and I'll help them put everything away right now. You were hired to keep these children quiet and well-behaved, not to throw a party and scatter toys everywhere." Veronica took a step towards Abigail, her voice low and threatening. "If you can't follow the rules of this house, you'll meet the same fate as the other nannies. Do you understand me?" "I understand perfectly, but I also understand that these girls need affection and attention, not just rigid discipline." Veronica's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "How dare you question me? I am the mistress of this house. And they are children who have lost their mother. They deserve to have a normal childhood." The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The five sisters were huddled in the corner of the room, their eyes wide with fear. Abigail held Veronica's gaze firmly, refusing to be intimidated. Finally, Veronica gave a cold smile. "You have courage, I'll give you that, but let me make something very clear. The girls are to stay in this room. I don't want to see them wandering around the house, especially when we have guests. They have their meals here, they study here, and they play here. That is the limit of their world. Can you follow that simple rule?" Abigail swallowed hard. "Why can't they move around the house? It's their home." "Because I said so. And if Richard asks, you will say that the girls prefer to stay in their room. Understood?" Before Abigail could answer, Veronica was already leaving the room, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed down the corridor like a gunshot. Abigail turned to the girls, who were crying silently. Her heart broke seeing those five little creatures so frightened. She approached slowly and opened her arms. One by one, the five girls nestled into her embrace, seeking the comfort they hadn't had for so long. "It's okay," Abigail whispered, stroking each of their heads. "I'm here now. I'll take care of you." "Are you going to leave like the others?" Clara asked in a choked voice. "I'm not, I promise. Mrs. Blackwood is very mean to us when Daddy is away," Sophia confessed between sobs. "She shouts and says we're a nuisance." Julia tugged on Abigail's sleeve. "Hungry?" Abigail looked at the clock on the wall. It was already 6 in the evening, dinner time. "Let's see what's in the kitchen for you to eat, shall we?" She took the five girls by the hand, leading them carefully down the stairs. The kitchen was enormous, all granite and stainless steel, but it was empty. The maid had already left, and there was no sign of Veronica or Richard. In the fridge, Abigail found some ingredients and decided to prepare something simple but nutritious. While she cooked pasta with homemade tomato sauce, the girls sat at the kitchen table watching her every move attentively. "My mummy used to do this for us," Alice commented in a small voice. "She would cook and sing at the same time." "Your mother must have been a very special person." "She was." Clara wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "She always smelled of flowers and gave the best hugs. And she told us stories before we went to sleep." Abigail served the pasta onto 5 colorful little plates she found in the cupboard. "What kind of stories?" "Stories about brave princesses, talking animals, magical adventures." Sophia accepted her plate with a shy smile. "Do you know how to tell stories?" "I know lots. After dinner, if you like, I'll tell you a really good one before you go to sleep." For the first time since she had arrived, Abigail saw the 5 sisters truly smile. They ate with appetite, talking quietly about their favorite things. Sophia loved to draw, Alice wanted to learn to play the piano, Laura liked to dance, and Julia was obsessed with butterflies. Clara, the eldest, kept a diary, where she wrote about her feelings, but she hid it under her mattress so Veronica wouldn't find it. When they finished eating, Abigail washed the dishes while the girls dried them with tea towels, humming a song she had taught them. It was a simple, domestic moment, but it was filled with a warmth that Mansion hadn't felt in a very long time. Back in the room, Abigail helped each of them change into their pajamas and brush their teeth. She tucked them all into their beds, adjusted the blankets and kissed each of them on the forehead. Then she sat on the floor in the middle of the semicircle of beds and began to tell a story about 5 brave sisters who embarked on an adventure to find a magical treasure. The following days brought a subtle but profound transformation to the 5 sisters' room. Abigail would wake up early every morning and prepare breakfast in the kitchen, bringing colorful trays to the room with heart-shaped pancakes, fruit cut like flowers, and fresh juice. The girls, who used to eat in silence with empty expressions, began to wake up excited, already waiting for the nanny's arrival. Richard had traveled to Manchester on the 3rd day, where he would oversee the start of a new residential complex project. Before he left, he said goodbye to his daughters with tight hugs and whispered to Abigail, "I see something different in them. Thank you for that." The words were etched in the young woman's heart like a seal of approval she didn't know she needed. With their father away, Veronica intensified her surveillance. She would appear in the girls' room at random times, always trying to catch some irregularity. But Abigail was careful. She kept the room impeccable, followed the established schedule, and ensured the children were always presentable. On the outside, everything seemed to be in line with the rules. On the inside, however, something magical was happening. Abigail taught the girls through play. Sophia discovered she could draw entire stories in homemade comics, using only paper and colored pencils. Alice learned to read better with the books Abigail took down from the high shelves, the ones Veronica considered too childish to be on display. Laura danced imaginary ballet on the rug, twirling with her arms outstretched while Abigail hummed soft tunes, and Julia, the little one, made collections of butterfly, drawings that Abigail drew for her. Clara, the eldest, was the one who worried Abigail the most. The girl carried a huge weight on her shoulders, always trying to protect her sisters and anticipate Veronica's moods. One morning, while the others were still asleep, Abigail found Clara sitting by the window, looking out at the garden below. "What are you thinking about?" Abigail asked, sitting down beside her. Clara didn't answer immediately. Her fingers traced patterns on the glass, fogged by the light drizzle. "I remember my mummy every day, especially in the morning, because she used to wake us up by singing, but it's getting harder to remember her face clearly." Abigail felt a lump in her throat. "Do you have photos?" Veronica put them all away. She said looking at photos makes Daddy sad, and that we need to think about the future, not the past. The anger Abigail felt at that moment was so intense she had to take several deep breaths before she could speak. "Clara, sweetie, your mother will always live on in you and your sisters, in the things you do, in the way you care for them, in the love you feel. No one can take that away from you. Do you think she'd be proud of me? I'm absolutely sure of it. You're brave, smart, and you have a huge heart. Your mother would be the proudest person in the world." Clara finally looked at Abigail, her green eyes shining with unshed tears. "You're not going to leave, are you? Because I don't know if I can go through this again. I promised I'd stay, and I always keep my promises." That afternoon, while the girls were taking their nap after lunch, Abigail decided to explore the house a little. She knew she was violating Veronica's orders, but she needed to better understand this place and this family. She went down the stairs silently, passing through the living room with its Italian designer furniture, through Richard's office with its scattered architectural plans, until she reached a less illuminated corridor. There she found a closed door that caught her attention. Unlike the other doors in the mansion, this one had an old lock and seemed not to have been opened in a long time. Abigail turned the handle gently, and to her surprise the door gave way. The room was an art studio. Easels held half-finished canvases, pots of paint were organized on shelves, and the walls were covered with colorful paintings. But what made Abigail's heart race were the paintings. They all depicted 5 girls at different ages, playing, laughing, hugging. And in many of them there was a beautiful woman with brown hair and a sweet smile, the girl's mother. Abigail walked through the studio as if in a sacred museum. Each painting told a story of maternal love, of happy moments captured in vibrant colors. There were individual portraits of each daughter, with details that only a loving mother would notice: the dimple in Sophia's chin, Alice's specific freckles, the way Laura tilted her head when she laughed. Looking for something? Abigail spun around. Veronica was at the door, her arms crossed, and an expression of controlled fury on her face. I'm sorry, the door was open and— Liar, this door is always locked." Veronica entered the studio with measured steps, her eyes scanning the paintings with something that looked like disdain. This was her favorite place. She spent hours in here, wasting time with these things. They're beautiful. She was very talented. She was weak, a dreamy artist, who didn't know how to deal with the real world. She thought she could raise 5 daughters practically on her own while Richard worked, and look how that turned out. Veronica picked up one of the smaller canvases, examining it coldly. She left Richard shattered, with 5 children to raise and a company to run. Lucky for him I came along. Abigail clenched her fists, trying to control her indignation. Did Mr. Blackwood love her very much? Love her? Veronica laughed, a sound without humor. He was obsessed with her. 20 years of marriage, and he still looked at her like it was the first time. Pathetic, if you ask me. But now he's with me, and I'm going to make this house a respectable place, not a circus full of paint and mess. And the girls, they have a right to remember their mother. The girls need to forget and move on. That's what's best for them. Veronica put the canvas back on the easel abruptly. And you, Miss Nanny, need to learn to respect the boundaries of this house. If I catch you snooping where you're not welcome again, you'll be fired on the spot. Is that clear? Perfectly clear. Good. Now go back to the children's room and stay there. Abigail left the studio with a heavy heart, but with a deeper understanding of the situation. Veronica wasn't just a strict stepmother. She was trying to erase every trace of Richard's first wife, as if by eliminating the memories she could completely take her place. When she returned to the room, the girls were already awake. Julia ran to hug her, and Abigail bent down to receive the tiny but love-filled embrace. "Where were you? We missed you. Sorry, little ones, I had to sort something out, but I'm here now. How about we do something special?" "What?" asked Alice, excited. Abigail had an idea that would probably get her into trouble, but was worth every risk. "How about we create our own secret garden?" The 5 girls looked at each other, confused. "What do you mean?" Sophia tilted her head. "We'll make a garden here in the room, with paper flowers, drawn butterflies, painted birds. It will be our special little corner, full of color and life." "But Mrs. Blackwood will be angry," warned Clara, always the voice of reason. "Then we'll do it in a way she won't see. Behind the beds near the window, it will be our secret." The idea of having a secret of their own excited the girls. Over the next few days, during the afternoons, they worked on their secret garden. Abigail taught each of them how to make different paper flowers: roses, daisies, sunflowers. Sophia drew butterflies on pieces of paper, which they then taped to the walls near the window. Alice created colorful birds, hanging from almost invisible threads. Laura painted leaves and branches, creating a paper vine that climbed the wall. And Julia made ladybirds and bees with bottle caps and paint. The garden grew a little each day, always hidden behind the beds and wardrobes, invisible to anyone who simply looked into the room from the door. But for the 5 sisters and their nanny, that little corner represented freedom, creativity, and hope. At night, after they were all tucked in, Abigail would sit on the floor between the beds and tell stories. They were always stories about sisters who faced challenges together, about the importance of unity and sisterly love. The girls listened, absorbed, and Abigail noticed how each of them began to internalize these lessons. Clara was learning that she didn't have to carry all the weight alone. Sophia was discovering her artistic voice. Alice was finding courage in reading. Laura was expressing her emotions through dance. And Julia, even so small, was flourishing with the constant affection. One morning, Abigail woke to a strange little noise. She opened her bedroom door and found a piece of paper on the floor. It was a colorful drawing of the 6 of them, the 5 girls and her all holding hands with a giant sun shining above, and flowers at their feet. At the top, written in Clara's neat handwriting, were the words, "Our family by heart." Abigail tucked the drawing under her pillow and cried silent tears of gratitude. In such a short time, those 5 children had completely taken over her heart. Richard returned from Manchester on a sunny Friday, 2 weeks after he had left. The first thing he noticed upon entering the front door was the sound. Laughter. Genuine children's laughter echoing through the mansion's corridors. He stopped in the entrance hall, motionless, trying to process the sound he hadn't heard in his own home for so long. He went up the stairs, following the source of the voices, and found the door to the girls' room ajar. Through the crack he saw a scene that made his heart swell with emotion. His 5 daughters were sitting in a circle on the rug, and Abigail was in the middle doing a funny voice while telling a story. Sophia was laughing so hard she was holding her stomach. Alice's eyes were shining with excitement. Laura was clapping enthusiastically. Julia was hugging a teddy bear with a grin from ear to ear, and Clara, his serious Clara, who had grown up too fast, was truly smiling. Richard stood there for a few minutes just watching. When was the last time he had seen his daughters like this? So free, so joyful, so childish. He felt his eyes burn and had to take a deep breath before knocking on the door. "Daddy!" Julia was the first to see him and ran into his arms. The others followed in a wave of hugs and kisses. I missed you, my loves. Wow, you all look so different. Different how? Asked Sophia, curious. Happier, much happier. He looked over the girls' heads at Abigail, who had stood up and was smoothing down the simple skirt she wore. Miss Thompson, may I speak with you for a moment? Of course, Mr. Blackwood. They stepped out into the corridor while the girls went back to their game. Richard leaned against the wall, suddenly looking more tired than when he had left. I don't know what you've done, but my daughters are transformed. I haven't seen them like this since before they lost their mother, Abigail completed softly. Exactly. He ran a hand over his face, a gesture Abigail was beginning to recognize as a sign that he was emotional. How did you do it? I just gave them what every child needs: attention, affection, and the chance to be real children. You have wonderful daughters, Mr. Blackwood. They just needed someone who could see that. Richard looked at her with an intensity that made Abigail look away. You're special, you know that. All the other nannies, they would come, get scared or frustrated, and leave. But you stayed. And not only did you stay, you brought back something I thought I had lost forever, my daughter's joy. They deserve to be happy. They certainly do. He hesitated before asking, And Veronica, how has she been behaving? Abigail bit her lower lip, choosing her words carefully. She is strict, but we've managed to follow the rules. There was something unsaid there, and Richard noticed it. He knew Veronica well enough to imagine that things probably hadn't been easy. If there are any problems, please tell me. The girls are my absolute priority. I understand, Mr. Blackwood. That evening, Richard had dinner with the whole family for the first time in weeks. Veronica had insisted that the girls have their meal in their room, as was the, rule. But he was firm. He wanted his daughters at the table. The tension in the air was palpable as the 5 girls sat in the chairs at the enormous dining table, with Abigail standing near the kitchen, ready to help if needed. Veronica was impeccable in a tight red dress, her jewels sparkling under the light of the chandelier. She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Richard, darling, it's not necessary for the children to dine with us every night. They're more comfortable in their room. They're more comfortable at the table with me, he replied, serving pasta onto Julia's plate. I've missed my princesses. During dinner, Richard asked questions about what the girls had learned, about their games, about their days. Veronica tried to steer the conversation to other topics, but he always brought it back to his daughters. At one point, Clara mentioned the stories Abigail told. Stories? Richard smiled. What kind of stories? Stories about sisters who help each other and about being brave, Alice explained. Abby tells them really well. Veronica dropped her fork on her plate with a metallic clatter. Abby, when did you start calling the nanny by a nickname? The girls looked at each other, frightened. Clara swallowed hard. She let us call her that. How inappropriate. Veronica looked at Abigail with barely concealed contempt. Employees should maintain a proper distance. Veronica, Richard's voice had a warning tone that Abigail had never heard before. They're children. If they want to call their nanny by her first name, I don't see a problem with it. It's a matter of maintaining appropriate social boundaries. It's a matter of letting my daughters be happy. The silence that followed was tense. Veronica folded her napkin with sharp movements and rose from the table. If you'll excuse me, I have a headache. Good night. She left the room with quick steps, leaving a trail of expensive perfume. After the girls had gone to bed, Richard called Abigail to his office. She entered nervously, sitting in the chair he indicated. Miss Thompson, I need to ask you a question, and I'd like an honest answer. Of course, Mr. Blackwood. Has Veronica been treating my daughters well? Abigail took a deep breath. This was the moment she had feared and yet longed for. May I be completely honest? Please. No, Mr. Blackwood, she has not. Veronica keeps the girls locked in their room all day, doesn't allow them to move around the house, and reprimands any sign of joy or play. She sees them as obstacles, not as her daughters. Richard closed his eyes, his hands clenched into fists on the desk. I was afraid of that. I suspected, but I wanted to believe I was wrong. You knew? I wasn't sure. Veronica is different when I'm home. But the other nannies, they all left scared or furious, and when I tried to talk to them, Veronica had already convinced them not to say anything or had dismissed them before they could speak to me. He opened his eyes and Abigail saw a renewed determination in them. But you're different. You stayed and you faced it. Why? Because I love these girls. In just a few weeks, they've become a part of my heart. I can't abandon them. Richard stood up and went to the window, looking out at the garden plunged into the night's darkness. My first wife, Helena, was an enlightened person. She painted, she sang, she filled this house with love and color. When she was gone, it was as if all the colors had gone with her. I threw myself into work so I wouldn't think about the pain, and I neglected my daughters when they needed me most. You were grieving too. I was. And when Veronica appeared so confident and organized, I thought she could bring some order to the chaos. She offered to take care of everything, the house, the children, the social obligations. I accepted because it was easier, but I was a coward and a fool. You are neither of those things. You're just a father who was trying to survive. Richard turned to her, and for the first time since they had met, Abigail saw tears in his eyes. You gave me my daughters back. You brought the light back into this house. How can I ever thank you for that? You don't need to thank me. You just need to be present. The girls need their father. I'm going to start traveling less. I'll delegate more tasks. My daughters can't grow up without me. That night, Abigail returned to her room with a lighter heart. Richard was beginning to see the truth about Veronica. Maybe things would finally change for the better, but she didn't. Know that Veronica had overheard the entire conversation from outside the office door, and that the woman's fury was simmering at dangerous levels. In the days that followed, Veronica began to watch Abigail like a hawk watching its prey. She would appear in the girls' room unannounced, check every corner for any irregularity, and question every activity. But Abigail was careful, always keeping everything in line with the established rules. Richard, true to his word, began to work more from home. He set up a temporary office in one of the rooms and spent his mornings in video conferences, but he always made sure to have lunch with his daughters and spend the afternoons engaged in activities with them. Abigail watched them from a distance, seeing the bond between father and daughters strengthening again. One afternoon, Richard suggested they all go to the garden. The 5 girls erupted with excitement, as they hadn't left their room in months, except for baths and occasional meals in the kitchen when Veronica was away. Abigail helped them put on comfortable clothes and tied up each of their hair. In the garden, Richard truly played with his daughters. He ran with them on the lawn, pushed them on the swings, and laughed when Julia tried to put flowers in his hair. Abigail sat on a nearby bench, just watching and feeling a deep happiness at seeing this family reconnecting. Veronica watched from the second-floor window, her perfectly painted red nails drumming on the sill. Down below in the garden, that pathetic scene was unfolding. Richard laughing with the children, the meddling little Nanny sitting on the bench as if she were part of the family. Everything she had worked for over the last 6 months was crumbling because of that insignificant girl. When she had met Richard at a charity event, she saw the perfect opportunity in him. A wealthy widower devastated by loss, vulnerable. She had been patient, pretending to be understanding, supportive. The marriage came quickly, perhaps too quickly, but Veronica was not one to let opportunities slip by. The 5 children were an inconvenience, but she was sure she could keep them under control while consolidating her position as the new Mrs. Blackwood. But that Abigail had ruined everything. She had won over the children with her irritating simplicity and her exaggerated affection. Worse still, she was influencing Richard, making him question Veronica's decisions, making him look at his daughters in a way he hadn't in months. She couldn't allow it. Veronica moved away from the window, her heels clicking on the floor as she walked towards the closet. She picked up her phone and made a call. "Hello? I need you to come for dinner at my house tomorrow night. Bring your wife and children. Yes, it will be an important meeting. Richard needs to impress you to close that deal." She hung up with a satisfied smile on her lips. The next morning, Veronica announced at breakfast that she would be hosting an important dinner with potential investors. "Richard, you know how crucial it is that this evening is perfect. The Liverpool contract depends on it. Richard nodded, focused on cutting Julia's pancake into small pieces. Of course, I'll prepare accordingly. Excellent. And the children obviously need to stay in their room. We can't have any interruptions during dinner. Veronica. Richard, be reasonable. These are serious investors. They won't want to be bothered by children running around the house. Abigail, who was serving juice to Sophia, felt her stomach churn. There was something in Veronica's voice, a poorly disguised satisfaction that made her nervous. That afternoon was tense. Veronica personally supervised the dinner preparations, instructing the hired staff on every detail. She chose expensive flowers for the arrangements, had all the silverware polished, and checked every crystal glass. And all the while she cast malicious glances towards Abigail. When it was time for dinner, Richard put on his best suit and went downstairs to greet the guests. Abigail took the girls to their room and locked the door as Veronica had ordered. The 5 sisters were disappointed they couldn't see their father, but Abigail promised to tell extra stories, to make up for it. At 8 o'clock there was a knock on the door. Abigail opened it to find Veronica standing there, a cold smile on her face. "I need you to go down to the pantry and get more wine. The guests are drinking faster than we expected." "But the girls, they'll be fine for 5 minutes, go on." Abigail hesitated, but the 5 girls were already in their pajamas, ready for bed. She hurried down the back stairs, crossed the busy kitchen, and entered the pantry. She was looking for the wine bottles when she heard the door close behind her and the key turn in the lock. "Veronica, Mrs. Blackwood." Abigail ran to the door and pulled the handle, but it was locked. "Please open the door. The girls are alone upstairs." There was no answer. Just the sound of Veronica's heels walking away down the corridor. Abigail banged on the door, shouted, but the pantry was far from the dining area, and with all the noise from the party, no one heard her. She fumbled in her pocket for her phone and realized with horror that she had left it in the girls' room. She was trapped, completely trapped. Upstairs, Clara woke up thirsty. She called for Abigail, but there was no reply. She got out of bed and went to the bedroom door, turning the handle. It was locked from the outside. She called again, louder this time, waking her sisters. "What is it?" asked Sophia, rubbing her eyes. "Abby isn't answering, and the door is locked." "Locked?" Alice started to get scared. "Why is the door locked?" Laura began to cry softly, and Julia ran into Clara's arms. The 10-year-old tried to stay calm, but her heart was racing. Something was very wrong. "Let's call for Abby together," she instructed, really loud so she can hear us wherever she is. The 5 sisters went to the door and began to shout, banging on the wood. "Abby, Abby, where are you?" Downstairs, hidden in a dark corridor, Veronica listened to the muffled cries and smiled. Everything was going according to plan. When Richard went upstairs and found the girls alone, hysterical and locked in their room, with the nanny nowhere to be found, he would have no choice but to fire the meddler. And Veronica would make sure Abigail left without a chance to explain herself. But Veronica had underestimated 2 things: the determination of the 5 sisters and the persistence of Abigail. In the pantry, Abigail had not given up. She began to search for anything that could help her get out. She found a box of old tools on a high shelf and grabbed a screwdriver. Carefully, she began to try to force the lock on the door. In the room, Clara had an idea. She remembered the secret passage that connected the bedrooms to the hallway bathroom, an old service passage that had existed since the mansion was built. Her mother had shown it to them once during a game of hide-and-seek. "Come on," she whispered to her sisters. "I know a way." Clara pushed one of the heavy wardrobes away from the wall, revealing a small, hidden door. It was low and narrow, but the 5 girls were small enough to fit through. One by one they entered the dark passage, with Clara leading the way, using the torch on her phone. The passage was dusty and full of cobwebs, but the girls pushed on, determined to find Abigail. They reached a fork. "Which way now?" asked Sophia. "This way. Goes to the hallway bathroom. The other goes to the kitchen," Clara explained. "Let's go through the kitchen. If Abby's disappeared, she must be downstairs." They followed the dark tunnel, holding hands so they wouldn't get separated. The passage sloped gently downwards, and they could hear the noise of the party below. They reached a small door that opened into a storage area near the kitchen. Clara pushed the door, but it was stuck. "It won't open." "Let me try." Sophia joined her, and together they pushed with all their might. The door suddenly gave way, opening into a dark room full of old boxes. But when they tried to leave, they realized with horror that the door they had come through had closed behind them, and the latch had locked automatically. Now the 5 girls were trapped in a cold, dark storage room, far from anyone who could hear them. Laura began to cry louder, and Alice hugged her. Julia clung to Clara tightly, trembling. "It's okay." Clara tried to sound brave, but her voice trembled. "Abby will find us. She always finds us." In the pantry, Abigail finally managed to force the lock. The door opened, and she ran out, racing up the stairs. She reached the girls' room and found the door locked from the outside. With her heart pounding, she searched for a spare key she knew was kept in a nearby vase. Her hands were shaking so much that she dropped the vase, which shattered on the floor, but she managed to grab the key. She opened the door and entered the empty room. "Girls! Girls!" She searched the entire room, under the beds, in the closet, but they were nowhere to be found. It was then that she saw the wardrobe moved away from the wall and the small door open. "Oh my God," she whispered, entering the passage without hesitation. Downstairs at the dinner party, Richard realized something was wrong when he heard the sound of breaking glass upstairs. He excused himself from the guests and hurried up the stairs. He found the porcelain shards scattered in the corridor and the door to the girls' room wide open. "Abigail! Girls!" He entered the room and saw the moved wardrobe. Veronica appeared behind him, feigning concern. "What happened? Where are the children?" "I don't know, they're gone." Richard was starting to panic. Richard stared at the secret passage, his heart pounding. He knew about that passage. Helena had shown it to him years ago, but he never imagined his daughters would use it. And why would they? Why would they flee their room? Where was Abigail? "Maybe the nanny took the girls somewhere," Veronica suggested, her voice dripping with false concern. "Do you really trust her, Richard? A complete stranger looking after your daughters?" "Shut up, Veronica." The sharpness in Richard's voice made her recoil. He grabbed a torch he kept in a hallway drawer and entered the passage without hesitation. The tunnel was narrow and low, and Richard had to crouch to get through. He followed the dusty path, calling for his daughters. "Clara, Sophia, Alice, Laura, Julia, where are you?" In the storage room, the girls heard their father's voice, but their own voices were weak from shouting. Clara gathered all the strength she had left. "Daddy, we're here, Daddy!" The muffled sound reached Richard, and he quickened his pace, following the direction of the voice. He reached the fork and turned towards the kitchen. The passage sloped down, and he nearly stumbled in his haste. Abigail was a few feet ahead of him, also searching for the girls. She was knocking on the walls, trying to find a door or an opening. When she saw the light from Richard's torch, she turned quickly. "Mr. Blackwood, the girls are in here somewhere. I heard them." "What happened? Why did they come in here?" "I was locked in the pantry. When I managed to get out and came back to the room, they were gone. I think they went into the passage looking for me." Richard didn't have time to process that information now. He kept moving forward until he reached the door, leading to the storage room. It was closed, but he could hear the girls crying on the other side. "Girls, stay away from the door. Daddy's going to break it down." With all his strength, Richard kicked the door near the handle. The old wood gave way on the third try, and the door swung open. The 5 girls were huddled in the corner of the dark room, their faces stained with tears and dust. "Daddy!" They ran to him, and Richard fell to his knees, hugging all 5 of them at once. The tears he had been holding back finally fell as he kissed each of their heads. "Are you okay? Is anyone hurt?" He quickly checked them over, looking for any injuries. "We're okay, Daddy," Clara sobbed. "But Abby was gone, and we were scared." "Abby!" Julia stretched her little arms towards Abigail, who had reached the doorway. The nanny rushed into the room and knelt, hugging the 5 girls along with Richard. "Thank God you're safe. I was so worried." Abigail checked each little face, wiping away tears with her trembling hands. Richard looked at Abigail over his daughters' heads. Her eyes were red, her face dirty. with dust, but there was such intense love in her gaze that he felt something shift in his chest. "You said you were locked in the pantry?" "Yes, Veronica asked me to get some wine, and then she locked the door." Richard's jaw tightened. "Let's get out of here and talk properly." He carried Julia and Laura while Abigail held the hands of Alice, Sophia and Clara. They left the storage room and emerged into the kitchen corridor, where the hired staff stopped working to stare in astonishment at the group covered in dust and cobwebs. Richard led them all, straight to his office, completely ignoring the guests still in the dining room. Veronica appeared at the office door, her eyes wide with shock as she saw her plan had failed. "Richard, what happened? The guests are waiting." "To hell with the guests." Richard settled Julia and Laura on the sofa and turned to his wife with an expression Abigail had never seen. It was pure fury. "You locked Abigail in the pantry. Why?" "Me? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me." His voice echoed through the office. The girls flinched, but Abigail hugged them, shielding them with her body. "You deliberately locked the nanny in, left my daughters alone and locked in their room, and now you stand here, feigning innocence. You're going to believe the word of a servant over your own wife? I'm going to believe the word of someone who has proven 1,000 times over that she cares more about my daughters than you ever have." Veronica turned pale, then red with anger. "You're being ridiculous. That girl is manipulating you, turning you against your own wife." "My wife?" Richard laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "You were never a real wife, Veronica. You were an opportunist who saw a vulnerable widower and decided to take advantage. How dare you? I dared to trust you. I dared to believe you could love my daughters, but all you wanted was my money and my status." Richard went to the computer in the corner of the office and started typing. "You do know this house has security cameras in every corridor, right? I had them installed after Helena passed. For the girl's safety." Veronica blanched. "Richard, let's see what the cameras have to say." He opened the security system and began reviewing the day's footage. Within minutes, they all saw Veronica asking Abigail to get wine, following her to the pantry and locking the door. They saw Abigail banging and shouting from the other side. But Richard didn't stop there. He kept rewinding the footage day after day, and what he saw made his blood boil. Veronica shouting at the girls, depriving them of food as punishment, keeping them locked in their room for hours on end. There was one particularly distressing scene where she was gripping Clara's arm tightly, leaving marks while screaming that the 5 of them were ungrateful problem children. "My God," Richard whispered, his hands trembling over the mouse. "How did I not see this?" "Because you were too busy working," Veronica tried to defend herself, but her voice no longer held the same confidence. "Someone had to maintain order in this house." "Order?" Richard turned to her with such fury that Veronica took a step back. "You call this order? Mistreating my daughters, depriving them of affection, turning their home into a prison?" "I was trying to discipline them. They're spoiled, willful, they need discipline. They are children who lost their mother. They needed love, not tyranny." Clara broke free from Abigail's arms and ran to her father. "Daddy, Mrs. Blackwood is mean. She hits us and says we're a burden in her life. She says you only married her because you needed someone to watch us." The other girls began to tell their own stories, each one revealing months of emotional abuse and neglect. Richard listened to them with a broken heart, realizing how much he had failed them by being blind to the truth. When the girls had finished, Richard turned to Veronica with a deadly calm. "I want you out of this house now. You can't throw me out, I'm your wife. Not for much longer. I'll be filing for an annulment tomorrow, and if you try to fight it, I will use all of this footage as evidence of child abuse. You will leave without a penny of my money, do you understand?" Veronica looked around the room, searching for some support, but found only cold stares. Even the staff who had gathered at the office door were looking at her with contempt. "You'll all regret this. All of you. The only thing I regret is ever letting you into my daughter's lives." Richard picked up his phone and dialed. "Hello? I need you to come to my house immediately to escort someone out." "Yes, now." 15 minutes later, 2 security guards accompanied Veronica as she collected only her handbag and a few clothes. She walked out the front door, her heels clicking furiously on the marble, vowing a revenge that no one took seriously. When the door closed behind her, it was as if the entire house breathed a sigh of relief. Richard sank onto the office sofa, running his hands over his face. The 5 girls crowded around him, and he hugged them tightly, whispering apologies and promises to be a better father. Abigail stood near the door, unsure whether to stay or go to her room. Richard looked at her and held out a hand. "Come here." She approached timidly, and he pulled her down to sit on the sofa beside them. "You saved my daughters, not just tonight but every day since you arrived. You loved them when they needed love the most. How can I ever thank you for that?" The months that followed Veronica's departure were a time of healing and rebuilding. Richard kept his word and began working mostly from home, delegating travel only when absolutely necessary. He rediscovered the joy of being a present father, of participating in his 5 daughters' daily lives, of getting to know their unique personalities and their dreams. Abigail continued as their nanny, but her role gradually changed. She wasn't just an employee, she was part of the family. Richard insisted that she dine with them every night, participate in weekend activities, and give her opinion on important decisions concerning the girls. One September morning, Richard woke with a strange feeling in his chest. He went down to the kitchen and found Abigail already making breakfast, her hair in a simple ponytail, humming softly as she flipped pancakes. The morning sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating her face, and Richard found himself frozen, just watching her. It was in that moment that he realized he was in love. He wasn't sure when it had happened, if it was on the first day when he saw her kneel to talk to the girls, or when he found her hugging all 5 of them in the storage room, or in one of the thousands of small moments in between, but he was in love with this simple, generous, and light-filled woman. "Good morning," Abigail greeted him with a smile. "Can you wake the girls? Breakfast is almost ready." Richard nodded, still processing the revelation. He went upstairs in a daze, woke his 5 daughters with kisses and hugs, and helped each of them get dressed. When they returned to the kitchen, Julia ran into Abigail's arms, who lifted her up with ease. During breakfast, Richard watched how Abigail interacted with each girl. She knew Sophia's tastes, knew when Clara needed space, understood that Alice got shy when nervous, noticed when Laura was tired, and always had a lap available for Julia. It was as if she had been born to be a mother to these 5 children. "Abby," Julia was saying, her mouth full of pancake, "you're our heart mommy, aren't you?" The silence that followed was heavy. Abigail blushed intensely, not knowing what to say. The other 4 girls looked at her expectantly. "Julia's right," Clara said softly. "You take care of us. You love us. You're always here. You're our heart mommy." Abigail felt her eyes sting. "You're my heart girls too. I love each of you more than I can put into words." Richard felt his chest tighten with so much emotion he could barely breathe. He stood up abruptly from the table. "Excuse me," he mumbled, heading out to the garden. Abigail found him a few minutes later, sitting on the bench where she used to sit to watch him play with the girls. She approached slowly. "Mr. Blackwood, is everything all right?" "Richard," he corrected gently. "Please, call me Richard." "Richard," she repeated, the name feeling strange on her tongue. "Did I say something wrong?" "No, you said everything right. That's what scares me." He looked at her and Abigail saw something in his eyes that made her heart race. "Abigail, can I ask you a very personal question?" "Of course. Are you happy here, with the girls in this house, with me?" "I'm the happiest person in the world. I never imagined it was possible to love 5 children so much. They filled a space in my heart I didn't even know existed. And me? Do you feel anything for me beyond professional respect?" Abigail's breath hitched. It was the question she had both feared and longed for. I shouldn't." "Why not?" "Because you're my employer. Because you lost your first wife and you're still grieving. Because it would be inappropriate and—" "Abigail." Richard stood up and faced her, his hands gently holding her shoulders. "Helena will always be a part of my story, the mother of my daughters, and I will always honor her. But she's been gone for almost 2 years, and I've learned that the human heart has an infinite capacity to love. Richard, let me finish. You came into our lives as a nanny, but you became so much more. You brought joy back to my daughters. You brought color back into this house. And somewhere in these last few months, you brought joy back to me too. I'm in love with you, Abigail. Deeply, completely, and irreversibly in love. Tears rolled down Abigail's face. I love you too. I tried not to. I tried to keep my distance, but I couldn't. You're kind, dedicated, a wonderful father, and a good man. How could I not fall in love? Richard pulled her into a hug, and Abigail let herself be enveloped by that warmth, by the feeling of finally being home. They stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other until they heard giggles behind them. The 5 girls were peeking through the kitchen window, huge smiles on their faces. When they realized they'd been caught, they ran out into the garden. "Daddy's going to marry Abby!" Sophia jumped excitedly. "Hold on!" Richard laughed, still holding Abigail by the waist. "I haven't asked her to marry me yet." "Then ask her." Alice clasped her hands as if in prayer. Richard looked at Abigail, and she saw nervousness and hope mixed in his gaze. Would it be too crazy? To marry me, to be a stepmother to 5 noisy girls, to become part of this crazy family? It would be the best kind of crazy of my life. Then Richard knelt on the lawn, still holding Abigail's hand, as his 5 daughters gathered around. "Abigail Thompson, will you marry me? I don't have a ring right now, and this isn't the most romantic proposal, but it's the most sincere one I can make. You completed us. You made this house a home again. It would be an honor to have you as my wife." "Yes!" Abigail laughed and cried at the same time. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The 5 girls erupted in shouts of joy, jumping around the couple. Richard stood up and kissed Abigail for the first time, softly, as his daughters clapped and laughed. The following months were filled with preparations and adjustments. On a special day, Richard asked the girls to choose, together with Abigail, the flowers they would plant in the garden. Each chose a different flower that represented something they loved about her. Clara chose white roses for her purity and kindness. Sophia chose sunflowers for the joy Abigail brought. Alice chose violets for her courage. Laura chose daisies for her simplicity and beauty. And Julia chose pansies, simply because she thought the name was pretty. They planted them all in the garden on a Saturday afternoon, laughing and getting covered in dirt. Richard took photos of every moment, wanting to capture that happiness forever. The wedding was set for a spring morning in the mansion's own garden. It was a simple, intimate ceremony, with only a few close friends and family. Abigail wore a simple white lace dress she had chosen herself, with fresh flowers in her hair. But the real stars were the 5 girls. Clara, Sophia, Alice, Laura, and Julia were the flower girls, each wearing a lavender-colored dress and carrying bouquets of the flowers they had planted. They walked down the makeshift aisle on the lawn, scattering rose petals. When Abigail walked towards the altar, Richard felt his eyes fill with tears. She was beautiful in her simplicity, but what truly moved him was seeing his 5 daughters by her side, radiant smiles on their faces. The vicar conducted the ceremony with tenderness, speaking of family, love, and second chances. When it was time for the vows, Richard held Abigail's hands and spoke from the heart. "Abigail, you came into my life when I needed light the most. I thought I would never be happy again, that I could never be the father my daughters deserved. But you showed me that love has no limits, that family is about choice and presence, not just blood. I promise to honor you every day, to support your dreams and to be the husband you deserve." Abigail wiped away tears before speaking her own vows. "Richard, when I came here, I was just a girl from the country looking for a job. I never imagined I would find a family. You and your 5 wonderful girls have taught me the true meaning of love. I promise to care for this family with all my heart, to be the best wife and mother I can be, and to fill this house with love every single day." When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, the 5 girls cheered louder than all the guests. Richard kissed Abigail as their daughters hugged them, creating a scene of pure love and joy. The reception that followed was perfect in its simplicity. There was live music, delicious food, and lots of dancing. Richard danced with each of his daughters individually, whispering to each one how much he loved them. Abigail danced with them too, holding Julia in her arms as she twirled across the lawn. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, the whole family gathered in the flower garden they had planted. The 5 girls sat on Abigail and Richard's laps, and together they watched the twilight. "Do you think Mummy is watching?" Clara asked softly, referring to her biological mother for the first time in months. Richard hugged his eldest daughter tighter. "I'm sure she is, and I know she's happy that you have someone else to love and care for you." "No one replaces her," Abigail added. "She will always be your first mother, the one who brought you into the world. I'm just the lucky one who came along later and got to share in your love." "You're our heart, Mummy," Julia declared for the 1000th time, and everyone laughed. That night, after the 5 girls were in bed, Richard and Abigail sat in the garden, holding hands. The mansion behind them glowed with warm lights, and from the open windows came the sounds of recorded laughter. From earlier, it was their house now, not a cold prison, but a home full of life and love. "You know what's most incredible?" Richard murmured, kissing Abigail's hair. "What?" "That you came into our lives disguised as an ordinary person, just a nanny looking for a job. But you were exactly what we needed, an angel sent to save us." Abigail smiled, snuggling closer to him. "I'm no angel. I'm just a girl who loves 5 little girls and a good man with all her heart." And there, under the stars, surrounded by the flowers they had planted together, and the memories they were beginning to create, Richard and Abigail understood that they had found something rare and precious, a second chance at happiness, a family chosen with love, and a home that was finally complete. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Abigail, Richard, and his 5 girls has touched your hearts. Just as Abigail discovered that the right people appear in our lives exactly when we need them most, even when disguised in simplicity, each of us can be that light for someone else. To continue this emotional journey, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about love, family, and second chances. You can find it by clicking here on the side. If this narrative moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on the video. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity of life, the power of true love, and the strength we find in family bonds. Tell us in the comments, have you ever been in a situation where someone unexpected changed your life? Or do you know a similar real-life story? We would love to read your experiences. Don't miss our upcoming content. Each story is a window to better understand human nature and the transformative power of genuine love. Until the next story, and remember, family isn't defined by blood, but by the love we choose to share every day.